Our next panel, titled Case Study, AI plus Materials Science, will be moderated by Jake Yeston, editor at Science Magazine. Please welcome our speakers, Dr. James Warren, Director of the Materials Genome Program at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, Jake Guglin, CEO of Foundation Alloy, and Lily Kim, General Manager at Microsoft Discovery.
All right, good to see everybody today. Thanks so much for coming. My name is Jake Yeston. As the introduction mentioned, I supervise the group of research editors in the physical sciences at Science Magazine, and I'm really pleased today to be joined by three such distinguished experts. And we're going to talk a little bit about how modern advances in artificial intelligence can advance fundamental and applied research in material science. So about 2 months ago, I had occasion to take a road trip to Michigan with my 12-year-old daughter. It was just the two of us in the car. And it was about a 7-hour drive, and about an hour into the drive, she said to me, "Why is everybody all of a sudden talking about AI? What is this AI thing? Can you explain to me what happened, what's different now than 2 years ago or 5 years ago or whatever?" And I gamely tried to answer that question, but then when the opportunity came up to moderate this panel, I thought, this is fantastic, because in 30 minutes, they're going to answer that question far better than I was able to in 6 hours. So I hope we succeed in that. But in that general vein, I want to start with you, Jim. And what I'm curious about is if you could give us just a sort of brief overview of the last 10 years of the Materials Genome Initiative and talk about whether the very recent advances in artificial intelligence are potentially creating the opportunity for a step change in how that initiative is able to accelerate materials discovery.
Sure. So just for the few of you who may not know about the MGI, right, the goal of the MGI was really to accelerate the discovery, design, deployment of new materials into manufactured products at half the time and keeping the costs down. Now, the vision behind that really was around computation, experiment, and data. And it was the first time the data had sort of been featured in an initiative, but this is really before anybody was talking about AI for materials research. The initiative was launched in 2011 as a cross-government effort to try to solve these problems. My agency in particular, though, was focused on the data piece, because NIST has long had the job of provisioning high-quality data to the world, and in particular to the US, to facilitate commerce. So as we started to focus on how we were going to deal with the data problem, we focused on 3 issues. One was around how do you move the data around. One of them was how do you ensure that it's good data. And then the final part was how do you build on top of that infrastructure, data-driven science. So that's what we were calling it big data back then, right? And we knew that that was going to happen, but we didn't know when. Well, it only took a few years before I'm talking to some guy in his office, and he's showing me how they can find a phase diagram of a material without knowing crystallography, because he was one of the first guys doing AI in this space. Changed my life. Right, it took me an hour and a half to understand him, but when I did, I knew that everything was going to change. Now, this was 2015. My first talk on this in a public venue was in 2017. The first traction, I want to say, was 2021. Okay, I mean, besides a lot of great efforts going on all over the place, but it wasn't until everyone got freaked out by ChatGPT, right, that this happened. So that's my personal journey, but it's also sort of the journey of where a lot of us have come around this. And now, of course, there's a much bigger story around how we're going to absolutely transform the way, in particular, material science, chemistry, discovery of new materials is going to change with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Jake, I'm going to go to you now. And you're an entrepreneur. You've started this metallurgy company, and I'm curious how artificial intelligence helped you find a competitive edge in this relatively mature space in the commercial sector.
Sure, yeah. I may be a little bit of the contrarian speaker today in some ways. So for us, we have a fundamentally new way to make metals. It was a scientific breakthrough. that actually didn't come from AI. That came from a lot of brilliant people at MIT and other universities thinking really hard about how do we do something completely different than what's been done in metallurgy before, which is a 10,000-year history of humanity in so many ways. Once that was established, now we have data sets that we're building day over day that run through that whole process that only we have. And that's something where artificial intelligence starts to become this incredible accelerant, not only for the day-to-day work in the lab, but how do we scale processes? So if we make something at 100 grams scale, the traditional way in metallurgy that you have to bring that up to speed or up to a commercial level is to make it at a kilogram, and then make it again at 10 kilograms, and make it at 1,000 kilograms. That's a place where AI can help us make that jump much more quickly. And because we're building this data set that is completely proprietary to us, one of the things we like to somewhat cheekily say is we think the models are becoming commodities. And we have this proprietary data set that every day that we're working on this that nobody else is, our competitive advantage and our moat is growing that much larger. You know, if GE decided tomorrow that they wanted to get in on this, it would still take them a really long time to catch up just on the last couple of years of data that we've created. And so that's how we think a lot about AI, is coupling it together with fundamental science to move more quickly and to create an even broader competitive advantage.
Got it. Thanks. Lily, over to you. I think that a lot of us know Microsoft as a software company, arguably as the software company, right? And so I wonder if you could walk us through how they decided to launch your group and what it says about their vision for what they're going to do in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. Very excited to be here. Very nice to meet you all. It is a good question, because if you think Microsoft, I don't think you automatically think scientific discovery, right? At the heart, we are a technology company, and that is our core bread and butter. And I think the way we really came about it is there were a couple, maybe a group of very passionate people who wanted to apply the technology Microsoft and frankly the world was building in the science realm. There's an entire group called Microsoft Research, MSR. I'm sure they've spoken here multiple times. I know Eric Horowitz is a big supporter and has spoken a lot here. And they, frankly, have been doing world-class science, SOTA models and tools, and putting them out as open source and other things, and partnering with government as well as commercial on leveraging data sets, making those better. And there was an opportunity to take all of that corpus of scientific discovery and knowledge, and actually, could Microsoft provide a platform offering that takes kind of hyperscale cloud and all the compute that Microsoft has been building over the years, advancements in AI and our partnership with OpenAI, and HPC, obviously, and in the future, quantum. Quantum is a part of the group that I'm a part of. Our organization is actually called Microsoft Discovery and Quantum. And stitch it together to accelerate the scientific discovery process and move from hypothesis generation into identification of a new molecule, into analysis, synthesis, and then feeding that all back into an iterative scientific discovery loop that could dramatically accelerate scientific discovery. So we tried it. We had a bunch of scientists, a bunch of technologists, some models, world-class scientists who happened to be on staff, and we were able to, in a short order of time, 80 hours of compute, plus very, very smart scientists, plus wet lab, partnership with PNNL laboratories, actually synthesize a battery that could power a tiny watch that was 70% less lithium.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think we all had this kind of aha moment of, wow, we could actually accelerate things that traditionally took, let's call it months and years. And with a lot of technology, with very, very smart scientists, with actually really good models, some data, good data, and in partnership with organizations like PNNL, materially discover something meaningful. Pardon the pun. And from there was born this idea of, hey, could we come up with a platform offering, a product offering that would not replace a scientist, but augment and support and enable scientific discovery, again, with technologies that we had and we're building, and plus all the ecosystem of all our partners. and others who we would bring together
Yeah.
in, again, the acceleration of the scientific hypothesis generation analysis experiment loop.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Jim, back to you. You and I talked a little bit about, I was at NIST 20 years ago, and we talked about how it's actually in the Commerce Department, and really, I think, serves as a bridge between the academic sphere and the applied commercial sphere. Sure. And we heard Jake talk about his proprietary data set and the value of that proprietary data to his company. So can you talk a little bit about how NIST tries to, finesse that area between, what companies want to keep private and what academics want access to, and how you crack that nut?
Wow. Easy question. We get this question all the time, actually. In other words, and NIST, of course, has to navigate those shoals. And it's AI hasn't really changed that. There are some kinds of data that companies will never share unless they see a business interest in actually sharing it. And that's fine, right? So the real question is, we heard earlier today that the government itself has a large amount of data that the public owns. So unless there's a national security or economic reason, we should be figuring out ways to share that. So trying to figure out what a heterogeneous environment looks like where some of the data is shared, some of it is kept proprietary, some of it can be discovered, but you can't see it. And so you can say, hey, I have this data, but you got to pay up if you want it. I think are all very interesting questions that I think there are business models out there already that address a lot of these things. So I don't think we have to think too hard about it. We just need to get the right players to the table. NIST thinks a lot about the tech transfer problem, and I could go on at length, which, everything that I've been thinking about with AI is about how do we accelerate the low TRL research, right, into manufacturing, and what does that look like? Right. And to me, that's actually the excitement with AI. It's around self-driving labs, the cloud labs. We're probably going to hear more about that today. And the ability not only of those systems to create new materials with great promise for manufacturing or our lives, but also to generate the data that the AIs need so that you can create models that operate at the speed of manufacturing.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the biggest excitement with all of this. Because if we can do that, we can change the ability to insert research into manufacturing in a way that was the dream of the MGI, but was not easy. It was impossible before AI.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Jake, along the same lines, I know your company came out of MIT, essentially. Do you still have connections to MIT? Are there still sort of collaborative opportunities for cross-fertilization?
There are. So MIT has a new initiative for new manufacturing that is being spun up, and we're participating in that in a couple different ways, and there's some events going on in the fall. I think for us, one of the gaps in the material science world that I think it's really important to call out that AI hasn't necessarily been applied to yet, though, is not the discovery or the invention, but the scaling. So if you create, and I'm going to oversimplify this, and no offense to people in the crowd who I'm undervaluing here a little bit, but you create a chatbot that works really well for some applications. Scaling that chatbot 1 million times over, it's not trivial, but it's a little bit of cut and paste. If you make a metal that somebody really wants, scaling that 1 million times over is a way harder problem than making it in the first place. And so we keep up ties to MIT. We're constantly keeping an eye on the labs there and seeing what new technology is coming out of it. But at the end of the day, at least in our world, that invention piece is step 1 out of 1,000. And so a lot of what we do today is actually beyond those universities. However, we're trying to drag them along with us. And that's one of the things with this new the Initiative for New Manufacturing is MIT talks about the mind and hand. The mind is happening in the labs. How do we actually get the hand to work and help us bring these things to market where they can actually create value? 100 grams of vibranium changes nothing. You need to get into a level where you can actually put that out there if you want to try to change the world.
Absolutely. Lily, changing the topic a little bit, you and I were chatting earlier about a tool that your team is developing to reduce hallucinations. I know in the LLM space, that's
Yeah.
kind of the million-dollar question
Yeah.
is,
Yeah,
is it
yeah.
telling me the truth?
Yeah.
And so how have you been working on that tool, and how has it been applied to the materials
Yeah.
discovery area?
So let me just take a quick step back. So, as you mentioned, we're a technology company. We're not, this is my opinion, used to supporting scientific needs, right? We're mostly commercial. Obviously, we partner with universities and have, government business and stuff. But the bar for, let's say, accuracy might not be as high as you would want in a scientific endeavor, right? A research paper or something you would want to go through the FDA, et cetera. And so, people were using AI for all sorts of things, but one of the really, really critical things is the ability to make your analysis referenceable, repeatable, accurate in a way that is different from just I'm going to call it a commercial or consumer user of AI. And there are some technology innovations that we have either been adopting or have creating that are included as a part of how we think about scientific discovery. And one of them is, I'm going to call it kind of knowledge mining, knowledge graph. So I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with GraphRag. That is a technology that MSR and our organization created. And one of the people who created it is in the room. So I'm speaking as a user, not as the authority and expert. But it's the ability to take the data that you have and public data, index it, and then use it to ground your AI so that when you query your AI and ask it a question, it's not just making up an answer out of whatever, especially generative LLMs, but it's actually grounding the answer in the data that you have indexed. And obviously, if you have a lot of data, indexing that data is very, very expensive. And so we've created a new technology called Lazy GraphRag, where I'm going to call it just in time. Again, that's my pedestrian way of explaining it. If you want to learn more, please go and read more about it. But just continuing to think about, okay, we have all this corpus of data. Yeah, it's fragmented. Yeah, it's everywhere. But how do we even take the data that we have and leverage it better? And how do we use that data then to ground the analysis, ground the research, and be able to reference back to it, look at it, cite it in a again, scientifically valid way that's useful for repeating the experiment, justifying the experiment, sharing the experiment, having other people, and taking the data that you have plus external data and leveraging it better than we ever have. The other kind of technology advancement that I haven't heard us talking about, and I missed one or two sessions, so maybe somebody to talk about is agents. And that's kind of the ability to create with natural language a persona that can do an activity or action or task on your behalf, right? So my favorite agent that I use is Researcher. It's, just take it as a plug for myself, personal opinion. I go into Research every morning and I ask it a question. Today I asked it, hey, I'm going to this event. What should I say about Microsoft Discovery, to give me an answer? But what it does is, for me, is it looks in my inbox, looks in my SharePoint site, looks in my Teams messages, looks in the internet, researches across all of it, and then comes back and gives me an answer.
Yeah.
And otherwise, I would have to go in, ask a bunch of questions on the internet, go into my inbox, search for emails, and put it all together. But Researcher does that for me. It takes 2 minutes, less than 30 seconds. And it's just an easy way for me to just very quickly do some general research, and otherwise it would take me like an hour or two to do. And that's just a tiny kind of not very science. You can use Research for science too, but from a science perspective, if you're setting up an experiment, as an example, you create a question, a prompt. I want to create a battery that is less lithium, with the following properties. Like, help me. And you have a planner agent that then comes up, first hypothesis agent of, hey, I'm going to comb all your data through this knowledge graph, and I'm going to give you some possible candidates, some hypotheses based on all the knowledge you have, both internal and external. And then you look at it, and then you're like, all right, next query, okay, help me synthesize some of these. And then you have another agent that's the planner agent that's like, okay, great, I'm going to create a plan for an execution of this research. And then you look at the plan and you're like, great, execute. And then the orchestration kicks off, orchestration agent, and the orchestrator literally goes into, writes Python code or whatever that you need, and actually executes the analysis and the simulations and pulls in tools like ADFT to like actually synthesize and analyze, hey, is this a good compound or not? And all of that is just revolutionary. It takes a computational scientist who used to have to know Python code and know all these models and a bunch of stuff and be able to natural language write a prompt and literally just kind of engage with a set of agents that are executing all these activities on your behalf. It's transformative. And so there are lots of technologies like that we are engaging and coming with. And you know, one of the things I was thinking about as everyone was talking about the transformational nature of AI is some of the things we talk about at Microsoft is, you know, we're trying to come up with what does the user want? What are the user requirements? And my boss's boss always keeps telling us, hey, think of this like the buggy to car revolution. If you ask somebody, hey, what do you like about your buggy? You know, what improvements should you make to your buggy? They're going to come up with, well, I want faster horses, I want better, you know, but you're not talking about a buggy, you're talking about a car.
Right.
But nobody even knows what nobody knows what a car is.
Right.
So if we think about AI transformation, and apologies, I used to have a piece of tape here and it fell out. You know, and leveraging AI, it's almost, we're at that point where there's so much net new technology coming out, we may or may not, ooh, did it actually fall off a lot? Oh no, is this working? Is this working?
Yeah, I think it's still working.
Hopefully this is being taped. We may or may not even know the way research can be transformed because the technologies that's enabling the transformation hasn't even been invented yet.
Right.
Is in process of being invented.
Right.
So it's a very exciting time. You know, there's a lot of innovation happening in this space. And it's just, and I consider this the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
I know AI has been going on for a very long time. I know machines learning, but really the ability for just again a normal person like me to consume and leverage AI in this way is different.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I really think that the potential for acceleration of science discovery, we are at a different inflection point.
Yeah, absolutely. Much bigger team just by virtue of the AI. Jim, I want to try to, we've mostly been talking about the materials aspect in the abstract, and I want to maybe hear what your point of view is. You've had a long and distinguished career. What are the specific challenges in materials science right now? If there are some materials scientists in the audience that you think we're really targeting with all of these projects?
Wow. I mean, there are so many different ones. I mean, you know, we were just hearing a nice example of, you know, the classics. You know, metallurgy has been around for thousands of years. I think we define our ages by the materials from, you know, metals and stone and ceramics and now silicon. Their detailed knowledge of how you go, I mean, we were talking about this before, right? The material science is cooking, right? Core cooking is material science.
Yes.
Exactly, right? It's not an analogy. So understanding the relationship between how you make something and what the components are is at the heart of it. And it's a hard problem in general because either you have to develop technologies that allow you to essentially know where every atom is in the thing, and you could argue that the semiconductor industry, for example, is pretty close to that at this point. It's a very expensive way to make things, though. The other end perhaps would be concrete, right, where you're making it by the gigaton.
Right.
And yet, you want to control the properties of something that you're making in buckets or giant vats at the microscopic scale. So all of the challenges of material science come down to your ability to relate process to structure to ultimately the properties of these things. And you can pick any number of challenges, whether it's implants for your next knee, and making sure that it's FDA approved, to a stent made out of a nitinol and coated with a drug. I did some research 20 years ago on how that drug dissolves into the tissues. And there's a structure, again, as the deposition of that medicine on the stent matters. So it's a material science problem. So you can, everywhere you look, right, you're going to find interesting challenges. And so AI then brings a number of features. Arguably the most important one still is pattern recognition. Right, was the first application, it was cat pictures and whatnot. That works for the internal structure of materials as well. And then now, decision agents and things like this that allow you to decide which experiment to do next based on the information that you have. So do you want to look for satisfying the uncertainty, or do you want to try to exploit what clearly is working right now? Those kinds of decisions. So those sets of algorithms are really changing our ability to do science and to do it fast.
Absolutely. No, fantastic. Great answer. All right, we're almost out of time. So Jake, I'm going to give you the last word, and I'm just going to open it up. If there are any entrepreneurs here, what advice do you have to give them about what your experience has been like creating this company?
Think about the first step and the last step and ignore all the work in between, maybe. I think, especially in the context of this setting and the Special Competitive Studies project, one of the worries that I have, so I'll make this a little bit of a plea, I guess, is that the focus on artificial intelligence as the core and sole driver of all future value scares the hell out of me. And when we look at the competitive landscape geopolitically, again, maybe a little contrarian in this crowd, but I don't think there's any reason to believe that we are going to create a lasting and substantial competitive advantage in artificial intelligence against our peers right now. We may flip-flop back and forth over the next 20, 30 years, but right now there's no evidence to support that we are going to get ahead and stay ahead forever. And so I would encourage people thinking about starting companies to think about something where you can do something that is fundamentally new or different than what is currently possible. And that can be on the processing side in the materials world, it can be in a lot of different places, but I guess to put it bluntly, if China can throw money or labor or market scale at the problem, you don't have a competitive advantage for very long. And so I think that's one of the things where AI can be so powerful, is taking a fundamental breakthrough and accelerating it. And so if you're thinking about starting a company where you actually want to make a change in this landscape and in this context, I would say that's the place to start. If you want to start a company to make a bunch of money really fast, take AI, apply it to a service that already exists, and you're going to do great. But if we want to really try to win and reestablish American leverage in a broad set of industries and markets over the next 10 years, AI can't be the only thing. We have to be thinking about it as a tool, a powerful one, obviously, but we need to be looking for more than that as well.
All right, thank you so much. Let's thank all of these speakers again. I really appreciate the discussion.